Hey guys, in this video I've spent some time representing in a simple way Ryrie Home by Architectus, which is this building here. A very simple grid, dark, grey, and glazing. Quite a beautiful building and quite a classic modernist building where it's a purity of form, emphasis on the play of light, both from inside, we get these huge sort of framed views, and from the outside, the reflection of the sky being a critical component of the building. Like Mies van der Rohe. And I wanted to sort of springboard off that. This is the sort of the basic gridded building here. Very classic modernist building. Potentially this glaze, this curtain wall here is a bit crude. Normally the joints are a bit finer. But what I want to do is take you through quickly something that I've been learning with Flow Builder, which is how powerful simply playing with rhythm is, and then apply that to Ryrie Place. And the motivation is that this high glazed building is not quite an environmental catastrophe, but close to, in the sense that it's very inefficient to heat or cool. In Australia, it's about cooling, and also the glass contains a lot of carbon. You've got to essentially melt down sand into glass. And so reducing the glazing proportion of the facade is a very good way of increasing the building's energy efficiency performance from an OpEx perspective, and also the embodied carbon in the building, sort of that carbon budget in the construction of the building. And so in Giraffe, in the Flow Builder, basically, this entire gridded facade is controlled by two functions. The first is the stroke dash, which is how we divide the facade into strokes and dashes, where strokes are the columns and the dashes are the windows. So there's that small stroke and there's that dash. So if I were to make that stroke 1 meter thick and this that thick, then we have a more like a 1-to-1, like 50% glazing ratio, stripy building. It's a bit stripy for me. But if we increased it to something like that, we get a ratio of 1.2 to 0.3. So I don't know, it's a bit more glazing, but it's of a different character. Now, the other thing that we can do, the other parameter, is the offset, and that's where we can offset the depth of these mullions. And you can see as I offset that there, and they stick out proud of the transoms, the horizontal bits. There's a completely different character. So playing with very few parameters, we've gone from this to this in no time flat. Now I want to add an extra level of complexity, which is the syncopated grid. And I'm a big fan of the syncopated grid. And the way we do the syncopated grid is you go the start width, and then the window width, then the middle width, then the window width again. So instead of having one stroke width, we have two. And those two are, that internal one is different. And so we have a tartan grid. It's not like boom, boom, boom. It's like boom, tsh, boom, tsh, boom. We can get, I think, a bit more into it. You can sort of go a bit ham on the syncopated grid if you want. So maybe we make this 0.6, and then 0.1, and then 0.6, and then 0.1, and then what do I need? Now I need a 0.6, and then I need that's it. So now the syncopated grid has two thin elements for every thick element. And this works really well with the offsets, like the bigger offsets. What I'll do here, just to pull the other parameters, we can change the thickness of the transom. And obviously as we do this, the percentage of windows is falling. And we could also change its color to distinguish it from the main grid. So the design decision in Ryrie Home is that everything's the same color. But this sort of thing where you see slightly different colors is not unusual, even if that's very subtle. And all of a sudden, we've built a different looking building, but using exactly the same flow. And it's really fun in Giraffe to do this because you just copy the flow and then change it, and you get a new, all your changes are saved per geometry. All right, cool. There's my family of crystalline buildings. And now I did one more thing where if you come back to Ryrie Homes and Ryrie Home, And you can see I've added a different way of reducing the glazing by insetting a different type of material in the glass. So you can see this, you leave the main grid with its rhythm, which is quite cool. It's like a beautiful rhythm. And then you inset something that reduces the glazing without breaking the rhythm. And I've called it an inset. And we could make this thing shiny. There's no reason this thing doesn't shine like glass. And so you often actually see this where there's sort of like a very subtle difference between the see-through glazing bit and the non-glazing bit. Um, and or we could express it and say, well, let's not make it shiny, let's make it green, or whatever. Um, and you also see this kind of language. Something I'd love to do in Giraffe, but which you can't, is sort of scatter different colors or gradients across, like that grasshopper attractor thing. Or you make it sort of a similar, just like a slightly different tone on the gray that is changing the appearance of this facade. And if we've got this inset, maybe we can play around a bit more and we can say actually the mullion because can become a bit thinner, maybe it becomes a bit deeper, uh, and it becomes a really really fun sort of play on facade, uh, where we're changing the expression of this building without much effort, um, and you can see how effective that is. So I'm trying to get my camera to the side. For a side facade, like whether, for a west facing facade or a northwest, slightly northwest facing facade, this is amazing. Look, there's almost no sun. When the sun is low, you don't see in there. So as a privacy control, just extending those things out is incredible. And that is a lesson, very simple lesson of facades that I have learned just from playing with Flow Builder. Just it as a the you're shaped by your tools, and one of the things that Flow Builder does is make you really, really focus on really, really simple moves. And you get a sort of a new appreciation, especially for those kind of 60s modernist buildings.